right, so this is our test recording. Testing. Are my lips moving?
Your lips are definitely moving. They look out of sync to me, but probably not to you. Of course, now, how are you? Oh, are we going to have to kill this to be able to get the recording?
No. Yeah, we will.
All right. Well, what do you want to do? If it looks good to you, I think it's me because I'm having so many troubles right now.
Okay, let's just wait. And I can't tell because hello and welcome to another episode of The Heart of CX. I'm Joanna Palmer, and with me is Max Ball. Hey, Max. How's it going?
It's going well. How are you doing, Joanna?
I'm doing well. Doing well. It's a beautiful fall day. It's not sprung. What's
Yeah. Fall has
the verb for
fallen on
fall?
you?
What was that?
Has it fallen?
Maybe fall has fallen.
I don't know. Autumn has fallen? I don't know. Yeah, you're right. Spring springs and fall falls. I guess why not?
There we go. There we go.
Yeah. So since we're falling into fall, I think it's a good time to take on something really big today. And it's something that we tend to talk more on the contact center itself side, but I think today I want to talk about the vendors a little bit.
Okay.
And in my new role as an analyst, one of the things that I'm starting to see pretty quickly is the lines between contact center vendors and CRM vendors are starting to blur. I see them both charging at each other fast. So what do you think we talk about that a little bit?
Ooh, I love it. I love it. So, yes, I started to see this before I even started Ring Central, for sure. My CRM vendor was talking about contact center and contact center journeys and starting to put contact center components into the CRM. And I had partnerships with a couple different CRM vendors. For instance, Oracle was one of those, and they had done an acquisition with Right Now Technologies. Right Now Technologies brought a robust knowledge management platform as well as digital channels to the platform. So certainly saw the start of a play there. Salesforce was another one of our CRM partners, and we certainly saw some conversation or had some conversation with Salesforce as well about digital channels initially. And then they had announced their partnership with, I think it was Amazon, for voice as well. And so certainly saw that play coming.
Yes, I think it is very much started. And in the case of Salesforce, they're also doing a lot of partnerships and being a lot more open to have people connect to their voice capabilities. So I think there's a lot of investment being made there. I think both, Salesforce is doing it. I'm sure Microsoft is doing investments there. Oracle probably as well. So I think you're right. I think there's two directions here. And the first direction is the CRM people moving more to the contact center side. And I think the quickening of that is starting to happen. And I think we're going to see more and more of it. What's interesting to me is I'm starting to see the contact center people, I'll use the phrase fight back, that they're starting to stake out some claims, that they're more going up market. They're starting to talk about bigger pictures and bigger markets. For example, one of the things NICE has been talking about, and not under NDA, is they have data that shows 19% of interactions start in the contact center, but 81% start in Google or on the web or wherever, and it's clear they have every intention of becoming a part of those conversations. And historically, that's much more the domain of CRM to go after those sorts of conversations and such. So they're starting to move out of just customer service, move into more into, they've been getting into sales. They have outbound dialers and some things like that, but getting more intentional about sales and also about marketing. And they have a little bit, they have a different story than the CRM guys, because they're going to be looking at more of a holistic view of the customer journey and not as much on products bought, service tickets managed, but more on kind of on an interaction level. And we can I think we can spend a little more time digging into the details of what they're doing, but just how does that strike you of kind of the traditional CRM position and expansion and this idea of more of a contact center becoming more of a customer experience, customer journey player?
Yeah, and when I looked at CRM to potentially house my contact center journeys, at the time, and this was a few years back, I didn't feel that CRM had the complexity I needed to handle some of those contact center journeys. Historically, some of those journeys and routing can be very complex, especially when you're looking at omni-channel routing and some of the elevation and self-service and deflection. I certainly understand why both are going for the power play here. If we think about the maturation of the contact center, and we've talked about this over the course of the last couple of weeks about various different areas, certainly contact centers are turning into customer experience centers. And if you think about customer experience doesn't start when somebody calls customer service. It really starts, when they start learning about the company, and marketing is a key driver for that. And so, Max, I grew up in the contact center space. In my heart and soul is really there in the contact center. And so I think I am leaning towards contact center, taking some of those CRM functionality, anything that's a verb of engagement. So contact center is action, CRM is data storage. What are your thoughts?
So it's very interesting, because I think that's very true. And I think if you look at where the contact center people are going, and again, we're right now, there's not a lot announced. This is their bleeding edge, if you will. But if you look at some of the things they're doing, it's very much our differentiation is that real-time moment, is that more engagement, interaction. But they have a lot of data, and they're talking about the data, and they're going at the data. The Twilio acquired a company called Segment, and Segment claims to be the customer data. They're a customer data profile vendor. So they're taking data from a variety of sources and putting it together and building a customer picture. Sounds a lot like CRM, sounds a lot like some of the things we've been talking about. Twilio just made an announcement about an Engage product built on top of that to really start going after more of a marketing. And they have a service cloud and they have a sales cloud. So, wow, how much does that look like Salesforce at that point?
Right.
And then, Genesis acquired a couple of companies, Pointillist and Exceed AI. And what all these guys are bringing is some combination of data and AI. So they're again very similar, gathering that information, using AI to make sense out of it, and using AI at runtime to drive the next best action with an agent or the next best action direct to the customer. And NICE has some pretty similar things they're talking about. I already mentioned the 81%, and they did an acquisition of Nexidia AI to make sense out of this mass of customer data that they have. So they're all, I think there's some commonalities in how they're moving. There's differences in approach. And I got a hunch over time we'll find there's less differences of approach as they start getting public with their bigger picture, but they're not quite there yet. Yeah. So, I think you're probably, how would you compare and contrast the assets they have in the approach versus where the CRM guys are? And, because Oracle or Salesforce has Einstein, and there's a lot of AI and there's a lot of data, and so it's not like there isn't a lot of similarity in the assets all these players have. But how do you see, if these two guys are sitting on horses with lances going at each other, who's going to fall down?
Yeah, it's going to certainly be an interesting fight to watch for sure. And taking a look at overall market share today, there are some giants in this race. As we think about how quickly Salesforce has grown as that CRM platform, they have grown tremendously. I'm even thinking about some of their acquisitions as well. In terms of
absolutely
their Slack acquisition, how does that play into all of this? In the same respect, there's certainly some giants in the contact center space. And so, again, how do these things merge? And will there be a CRM and contact center super provider, group that prevails here? This one's a tough one, Max. Even taking a look a few years back when I looked at CRM versus cloud contact center and how we wanted to move forward when I was on the customer side, I did get questioned quite a bit in terms of why do we need to pay for a contact center license plus a CRM license? I mean, each one of those is a significant cost multiplied by the contact center agents. If you're able to remove some of that cost by merging the functionality together, it certainly makes sense. I certainly have to wonder who comes out on top on this one. The other thing to think about, and I certainly have not seen this yet, but there's all sorts of intelligence around the workforce engagement management components in terms of workforce management, quality management, all of those components, which I haven't seen necessarily on the CRM side. And so as we think about agent experience in this, yes, the AI is a part of this. So the Einsteins and the Nexidia is part of this, but there's so much more in terms of driving efficiencies within your contact center. And no matter how much the contact center evolves from a cost center to a revenue center, at the end of the day, there is still always going to be that efficiency part of this. In terms of utilizing your labor most effectively. So again, leaning towards the contact center side of things and bringing in the data. If we think of contact center as a verb, then I think of CRM as the adjectives to describe parts of the subject that then goes through the contact center.
So the customers are our subjects. So okay, I'll make some arguments on the other side.
Okay.
And I think the powerful one is the CRM vendors own the agent desktop. And I think that is a really powerful piece of all of this. Now, what I've seen as part of this play, the contact center vendors are going to come in and say, hey, my desktop is better. Why don't you move to my desktop? I think that's going to be hard. Getting contact centers to say, oh, I've done this for 15 years. Yeah, I'm going to change it now. There's a lot of people in the world who are easy to move on things like that, but in the contact center, that's not where so many of those kind of people live.
Yeah, and I think it really depends on what that UI looks like and what that system looks like. There are some prettier UIs than other UIs when it comes to CRMs. And if they've been doing the same thing for 15 years, Max, for goodness sake, it's time for a refresh.
Well, yeah, there's that. Absolutely. And so, okay, I think we're kind of voting and landing on the contact center is the more immediate problem solved, the more runtime problem, the more core problem. And therefore, the CRM becomes the database of record for the transactions and the history. Or transactions is a bad word, and history is for the products and the tickets and the sales. But that, okay, the scenario I'll lay claim to today, and probably tomorrow I'll lay claim to a different one, is CRM ends up becoming more of a back-end process manager, and contact center is more of the real-time, here's the customer information, here's what the customer has done. That sort of interaction information is hard for the CRMs to get. And really, if you think of this as the first play is going to be to marketing, the interaction stuff that's more interesting to the marketers.
Yeah. And even as we're talking about this, in terms of customer master data, there are some niche products out there that manage customer master data. And as you think about just all of the various different personas that you've got as an individual customer, all of your social handles, your email, your phone numbers, all of those components, do you need a CRM to manage those, or can you use a customer master data application instead? And, from a historical perspective, how many times have we talked about the contact center writing information back to the CRM? But with that, there's all sorts of caveats, all sorts of areas there to think about based on your CRM implementation and how you implemented, whether you did more of a standard implementation or if you did a more customized implementation. So it is going to be very interesting to see who prevails from on top of this battle we see going on right now.
It's interesting. I think 5 years ago and even 3 years ago, or maybe 2, if you had asked me who would win this, I would have said CRM all the way. And interestingly, I think AI is going to make a lot of difference here. And you look at Salesforce with Einstein and how advanced they are with AI, you would say, okay, so that just reinforces the CRM guys. But I think with the contact center, certainly the ability to use AI to tap into information that has not been tap intoable previously is huge. Yeah. And what it allows in terms of taking all this unstructured mess and turning it into a competitive advantage for them, that may be the game changer right there. There's a million other things going on, but I think that's a really big piece of all of this.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And, as we continue this conversation, one thing is very clear. No matter who prevails, organizations can't stand still. They've got to continue to innovate, continue to look at that entire customer journey, be able to stitch as much of it together. Because at the end of the day, customer experience is absolutely critical to an organization's success. And in order to improve your customer experience, you have to have data. You have to have end-to-end data from when that customer first learns about you all the way through that entire life cycle, so that you've got enough insights to be able to continue to evolve your customer experience.
What a perfect exclamation point on this conversation. I think we're talking about who's going to win and who's got what, but the bottom line is what the trend is pushing towards is getting rid of the silos, looking at the customer experience in a much more holistic way, in a bigger picture, and understanding more. And as customers, we're just going to benefit hugely from that. So I think I'm now feeling a little guilty that we spent so much time talking about this as a battle and not as much time talking about it as a benefit. So what a great way to end this is, oh, by the way, this is going to be great for us.
Yes. Yes, for sure. For sure. Well, I feel like that's a great spot to end on today. Thanks, Max. It's always great talking to you.
Ditto right back at you. Thanks, Joanna. Fun topic and great insights. Talk to you next week.
All right. Sounds great. Talk to you then. Thanks.
Thanks.